The 2022 Baylor football season was a disaster, and I mean disaster. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, it's Friday. Pretty much the only good news that I can give to you is that it is almost Christmas, almost Christmas Eve at least. I think the other piece, there's a piece of bad news I could give you. I don't have my microphone on me, which is like so on par with the night that I've had. I know you're probably listening to this on Friday. I'm recording this immediately after the game. It just ended. I had the, I'll say privilege to go. It was a bowl game, right? You guys have a lot of you have been saying like, oh, it's a bowl game. At least be excited that Baylor's in a bowl game. I hope you've come off that pedestal because it was -8 degrees. Baylor was playing Air Force and they got beat 30-15 in what caps off the, I don't know if you can't call it the most disappointing season of all time for Baylor football, but when you think about maybe the most underachieving football season in Baylor history, this one's got to go up there because you have a team that's top 10 preseason. Let me take you back to a year ago where Baylor wins the Big 12 championship. Baylor wins the Sugar Bowl. They're 12-2. Dave Aranda is the greatest coach that's ever existed. He's the best coach in the Big 12. And Blake Shapen could be first team all Big 12 next year if he beats out Gary Bohannon. Fast forward now, Baylor's 6-7. Got killed by Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl, and we're all sitting here on our hands in the midst of a season that started where the Bears were the top 10 and projected to win the Big 12. And like the opposite of that happened. It couldn't have gone. I'm trying to think of how things could have gone much worse, and there aren't a lot of scenarios that don't involve tragedy where this season does go worse in the way that it did. Namely the game. I know, and I'm going to get into the game and a lot of what Dave Aranda said in his press conference too, because I thought there were some good bites and some interesting stuff. He was pressed by a couple of reporters. I mean, he got some questions that were pointed as far as how this season, how this game went, and he gave some fairly honest answers. We'll get to that later on. We'll talk about the game later on. But right now, I'm just stuck on this season and how awful it was. I will take you back to the game against Iowa State, to the game against Texas Tech, the game against Oklahoma. There are points in this year where you think, okay, the pieces are there. Richard Reese is really good. Shapen was really good against Iowa State. I felt like that first half against West Virginia, you saw kind of the potential of what Blake Shapen could have been this year. It was just never consistent. And in those games where Baylor had the football for 40 minutes and forced 3 or 4 turnovers, remember the Texas Tech game where Baylor forces, like, what was it, 5 interceptions of 3 different quarterbacks? And it's still the same team that put on that display against Air Force last night. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me how the ceiling can be beating senseless a Texas Tech team, beating Oklahoma on the road despite not being a great Oklahoma team, going to Iowa State and getting a win, at least being competitive in a lot of games, and then being so non-competitive in 3 of your last 4 games when the trajectory felt so good for this team. We were sitting back, I mean, at least I was, at 6-3 thinking, okay, Baylor's receiving votes. They could be back in the top 25. Joe Goodman, just to shout him out from our Daily Bears, looked at me in the broadcast booth or in the press box one time and said, Drake, are you excited to go back to New Orleans? Like that's how close it felt like Baylor was to hitting the breakthrough, beating Kansas State, TCU, Texas, whatnot, and making their way back to the Sugar Bowl, or at least having a good year. Now, instead of even having a good year, they had, again, one of the most disappointing years that, I mean, it's got to be maybe the worst, most underachieved year in Baylor sports. Can we give it that superlative at least? Can we agree on that? And maybe I am spoiled for being upset with this. And I, remember when Baylor only went 1-11, you should be lucky that Baylor's even in bowl games and stuff. And I don't think that excuse applies when you've seen the full potential of what Dave Aranda and Baylor can do. Dave Aranda said in his press conference, this is a disappointing end to a disappointing season. There's not really another way to spin it. That's what this year was. It was disappointing. And honestly, when you look at the trajectory of this program, unless something changes in the transfer portal, which I feel like is possible, but unless it does change, this was a disaster. This was a devastating season for Baylor because looking forward into next year, what's your big glimmering sign of hope? And there are a couple, but there's not near the idea that Baylor is going to be good as there was the beginning of this year. And you lose your offensive line. You're trying to rebuild that from the portal. Your quarterback's got so many question marks, and behind him, there's literally nobody. I mean, I thought Blake Shapen played bad. Aranda's asked in his press conference what he thought about Shapen's performance. Shapen said the offense on a whole was bad. And then defensively, Travis Roeder put out a great tweet that Baylor will likely replace. I say replace. They will start 8 new guys on defense next year on a defensive unit that was not very good. Air Force ran all over them. And a lot of the teams toward the end of the year, Texas, TCU, when it mattered, especially Kansas State, also ran all over them. So what's the trajectory of this program going into next year? Baylor now, in 3 seasons under Dave Aranda, has 2 years under 500. Even if you take out that first year, which, I mean, how much can you really? It's 2 years under 500, maybe a year under 500, but that year under 500 was awful with a team that was supposed to be really good. Also in that 3 years, though, Aranda owns the best season in Baylor football history, the 12-2 Sugar Bowl win. So I don't know. Like, is it my job? Is it my job to figure out what is happening or why? I guess I can have opinions on it. It's not my job to figure it out, but like, I don't know if I do have an opinion on the fact that Dave Aranda owns 2 years under 500, coupled with the greatest year that Baylor football has ever experienced since the birth of the program. It doesn't click in my head how that makes sense. And overall, it doesn't make sense, but that's where this team is. And I asked Coach Aranda in the postgame press conference, and again, he got some pointed questions, but first thing, Coach, at 4 losses in a row, you lose Novosad, you lose drones. How do you keep all of this, a bad month, from spiraling? Here's what he had to say.
Drake Toll from Sports Illustrated's Inside the Bears. For 4 straight losses and Novosad drones, how do you take a tough month and keep it from spiraling?
I appreciate the question. I think it's to focus on things that are right in front of you, things that you can control. I think, I think the morning of, so yesterday morning, right, the morning of signing, I show up, it's early in the morning, and one of our video guys is there, and I'm going to grab a cup of coffee, and I ask him how he's doing, and he goes, I'm kind of not great. And I asked him, what's going on? And he brought up the recruiting part that you mentioned, and I just think, that was a struggle for us, just with the losing and everything else too. It just kind of permeates. And I think the staff meeting we had yesterday morning was, man, look at all the guys that we got. Look at all of the talent that we have, the people that are now going to be a part of Baylor, the families are now be a part of Baylor, and how much they wanted to come to Baylor, and people that are just going to make you and me and everyone else so much better. And so I think you have to be intentional about seeing the good and everything that's happening, but then you have to focus on what's right in front of you. And so I think that's a day-to-day, hour-by-hour thing when you're kind of in a storm.
Yeah, so that's the answer that Aranda gave. There's a good mix. There's a good mix of coach speak in that, the day-to-day, hour-to-hour. But I also think there's something to the fact that this is there's some positives still, right? That he's talked to the coaching staff that what can we do as a program to take the new guys coming in, especially, I felt like he really answered a lot of that in regard to Novosad and losing Novosad. What can we do as a program to right the ship on that? And it's focus on the guys who are committed, which I think is a really good strategy for Aranda and company, and hit the transfer portal hard. You'll hear his press conference later on. He talks a lot about that too. And that, to me, it says something good. Now, again, there's that coach speak part too, though, of like, gosh, when is like the click? When is the, okay, Baylor's better at football now? All right. Had to pause it to cool down. All right, before we go into the bowl game, I want to I want to pause and tell you about LinkedIn Talent Solutions. LinkedIn Talent Solutions, like the Apex, it is. You need to find somebody, you need to hire somebody, you need somebody to work with your job. I cannot recommend LinkedIn Talent Solutions enough. It is the number one place to go. Purple hashtag hiring frame. Baylor's needing to do this right now as a defensive coordinator. You put in these questions, you add your job, and you can narrow down candidates faster. Simple tools, all of that at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Right now, they are rated number one by small businesses, providing the right hire faster. LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Go to linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege, and you can put your job offer up there for free. Keep in mind, terms and conditions do apply. All right, the Air Force game was bad. I called Cameron after the game was over and just, what were your thoughts? And he goes, I think I would describe it as bad. And Dave also described it again as bad, disappointing way to end a disappointing season. Said the offense was really bad too, wholly bad, I think, or bad on a whole, as he said. And to me, the defense stood out. Like, look, you are playing Air Force. And I wasn't in the coaches' meetings this week, and I didn't help put the game plan together and everything for Baylor. But I can tell you, Air Force runs the football a lot. They actually almost only run the football in the triple option. Baylor allowed 276 yards of offense via only the run, 67 yards passing, which is like 10% of what Air Force threw for the entire year, or their quarterback threw for the entire year. But that 276. Only I can't, like, they're just going to run the ball. And they kept doing it successfully. And I'm sure it's frustrated every other opponent Air Force has had this season. But the fact they go for 276 and Baylor's offense running the football only goes for 42 yards, that's not good. Air Force had 67 rushing attempts. Baylor only had 26. Baylor kind of gave up on the run because they couldn't run it. They were 1.6 yards per carry to Air Force. Air Force's 4.1. Passing yards, 103 for Air Force. You would think this is where Baylor can really exploit the Falcons. No, only 188 for the Bears. 11 for 23, Blake Shapen. That's going to be a point of conversation for the rest of the offseason as well. And here is your wonderful, amazing stat of the game. Baylor on third down in this ball game goes 0 for 11. That's right, 0 for 11 on third and fourth down combined. They go a total of 3 for 17. That's 3 for 6 on fourth down, 0 for 11 on third down. Just dismal. You can't offensively get much worse than that, especially without turning the ball over. Like, that wasn't even an issue, and you just couldn't get yards. It wasn't that, we made some stupid mistakes. It was, our offense was just really bad against a solid Air Force defense, but you're Baylor. You're 4 stars. You're 3 4-stars. And you laid an egg against Air Force in a pretty dramatic way, with the nation watching, by the way. This game was televised on ESPN. It was the only bowl game of the day. So anyone who wanted to watch college football was watching Baylor and Air Force, and they saw the Bears have 19 minutes and 57 seconds of possession time. That's not good. It's not a lot. Air Force had 40 minutes and 3 seconds. One of their drives went almost 9 minutes, their first scoring drive of the game. And you kind of knew at that point, this is likely not going to go very well. It was a touchdown for Baylor right there at the end of the half, and the 2-minute drill. I thought it'd be their only touchdown of the game that kept them in it per se at half. It was only 9-7 instead of 9-0, which is probably what it should have been. And in the second half, you're like, all right, here's you're within striking distance, Baylor, go do it. And they didn't do it. I want to give a free pass. I don't give out very many free passes. I want to give a free pass to John Mayers and Isaac Power because they were kicking a brick. Like, the ball was frozen solid. Fans, I want to commend those who showed up. I would not. I'm usually the guy that takes a picture of the crowd and makes some kind of joke about it wherever I am, because crowds in college sports are dwindling. This one, it makes sense. I was in the press box and my hands were so cold I could barely type. I can't imagine what it was like outside. So those that came, you're far better than I am. I would probably not have been able to brave that, to be honest with you. And the fact you did says a lot. Any Baylor fan that was at that game, you deserve a badge of honor. And it makes me sad. The players aren't playing inherently for the fans, right? They're playing for so much more than that. But if you're a Baylor player, you look at your band. Their instruments were frozen. They couldn't play. So they were singing their songs because their instruments were frozen. You look up, if you're a fan or if you're a player, you look up at the stands and you see these fans who they're frozen. The instruments are frozen for the band. The fans are frozen in general. And to me, it would just make me hit a separate gear and want to play that much better for the people there. And instead, Baylor put out a performance where they had 230 total yards of offense. And it probably couldn't have been a worse, more boring game. That's and again, the players aren't doing this just for the fans, but wow, you would expect, I mean, I at least would want as a player to put on a show, to do something for the people that showed up in -8 degrees where I don't even know how people were sitting in that, especially with the game that was put on. And it's just sad the way that everything went. In this game, in this season, it was the perfect finish to a terrible year. And now we've got an entire offseason to sit and talk about it, to sit and talk about what Baylor can do a lot better next year. The monkey's off your back. The pressure's off your shoulders here. The monkey's probably back on your back, but the pressure's off your shoulders. And you're not the preseason favorite in the Big 12. You're not even ranked preseason. All right, you're the underdog. Go retake that underdog role and go do something special next year if you're Baylor. There's been an underdog type team in the Big 12 championship, it feels like, once almost every year at this point, because the parity in the league, TCU obviously being this year's. Go do that as Baylor next year. The pressure's off. Go play loose. Go do it. Now, obviously, today's game was terrible. Last night's game was terrible. If you want to hear from Dave Aranda, we've got it all loaded up. I've got his best sound bites right here for you. And there are some good ones because he was asked again some pointed stuff. But first, before we get to Dave, I'll tell you about NHTSA. So did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? So driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. It means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, your parents can tell, everyone knows. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? They see it every day. Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. Driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Dave, take it away.
Relationships you built and the people that they are, and it's hard to say goodbye, especially after an outcome like this, and that's where we're at. I am proud of the fight that we had. Dylan's on the field. There's 20 seconds left. The game is way out of reach, and we're fighting for a yard, and we're able to kind of hold it off and then come off the field excited. And I think that kind of speaks to these guys. I think, from a team perspective, it's a disappointing end to a disappointing season. A lot to be learned for our returners and our younger people. A lot to look at and to try to emulate as well. I think the fight that we just mentioned, and the showing up under tough circumstances, and the never backing down, but the always putting yourself out there. Things like Dylan did tonight, I think, are things that we can build on. With that, take any questions you guys have.
Yes, for Dylan. You want to grab the mic real quick, just so people can hear back there?
Dylan, their quarterback, Daniels, he came up with a lot of big plays. What made him so tough to deal with?
Yeah, he's a good player. Ford's a good player, and he's athletic. He can make all the throws and make all the runs. And him and 20 really made their offense run, and we saw that on tape. That wasn't really surprising. Disappointed in the way that we played as defensive players. And that starts with me. I misfit some runs. I should have pulled up the quarterback a couple times, and I mean, looking back, you always think of the things that you could have done better, and I don't know. I'm just thankful for the opportunity to step out there tonight one last time with those guys, and hard to say goodbye, as Coach mentioned. Like, I'm going around the locker room before this, hugging every guy, and I mean, it's 3 years worth of relationships, and so definitely hard to say goodbye.
In the back, Dylan, Eric Kelly from Fox 44 Sports in Waco. It may be hard to do right after a loss, but just as well as you can you sum up what being a Baylor Bear has been like for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give you a good soundbite right now. I mean, I'll take a few weeks here and think about what it really means to me to be a Baylor Bear. But I mean, coming down here as a 20-year-old kid and committing to play for Coach Aranda and just the program that he's built, I'm really proud to be a part of. Hopefully, what's just starting at Baylor. I mean, I'm super excited for the young guys in the locker room, just looking around the work that I've seen them put in and what they'll show in the years to come. I hope I've started something that I'm going to be proud of down the road. I'm super proud of the guys in the locker room right now and just the whole team. I'm so thankful for the relationships, and that was the biggest thing when I wanted to commit. Was I wanted to commit to a place where I was proud to go back and visit, and I'm going to be proud to go back and visit Baylor. That's for sure. I mean, I'm just so thankful for everybody in Waco, and it's Baylor means the world to me, and just very proud to call myself a Baylor Bear for life.
Dave, oh. Go ahead. Do you have a mic?
65 Sports. Dave, last year at this time, you're preparing for a Sugar Bowl. Best season in Baylor history, a Big 12 championship. Has this program taken advantage of that in any way with the momentum, or have you gone backwards?
I appreciate the question. I think of just as a completely different team last year to this year. And I think a lot of learning for me, I look back now, and I've had some time to do this prior to this question, and I see the things that I see some things coming. There's other things I didn't see coming, and that's probably a lack of experience on my part. I think to be real transparent about that only helps you get better. And then, I think the college football world, as it changes with transfer portal and everything else, I think, just my personal, view of that, and that's something here to stay, and how that benefits us. I think all of that, has grown throughout this year, and this year could almost be looked at as a lesson in that. And so I just see us getting better. I think for the guys that are returning, to see the work, despite the not, the work despite the not instant gratification, and to continue to work, they're going to see, they've seen that, and then they're going to see, the adversity and how to handle it, and I think we'll only be better because of it.
Time for one or two more here.
Dave, Parker Ream, Fox 44 in Waco. Obviously, kind of going along with that, right over here. Going along with that, you have kind of new motivation heading into next year, and you guys won't be looked at as necessarily the favorites. What's the next step heading into the offseason, and what do you think you guys need to do to be better prepared for next year?
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think we're still in the midst of recruiting. So there's a couple pretty valued spots that we've got some valued prospects for. And January, there's a limited kind of window there to be able to get some guys to campus and to see if something can work out and all of it. And so we're going to be working on that, and then finalizing our team now in terms of what that team's going to look like for next year. And then I guess the third piece would be the class that we just signed. It was so impressive and so excited about is getting them settled in and really setting standards and expectations on how winter's going to go so that we can get started off on the right spot. I think all of that's aided with a team that's been through some tough lessons and has seen, one way to do it per Smoke's question, one way to do it and another way to do it. And we all got to get aligned to do it the right way.
Hey, how did you see Blake playing in this game?
And how much was he impacted by the elements, do you think?
Appreciate that. Yeah, disappointed just on a whole offensively. I just thought that, the previous games, there was probably more juice and excitement and all of it to play, and just way disappointed, and just the lack of that. And I think it really starts with the run game. That is really the identity of our offense, and you could argue our team. And a lot of credit goes to Air Force and just always being where they need to be, and the effort that they played with, and just all of it. But yet, I don't think we held up to our side of the bargain. And then I could see Blake pressing, and it just kind of fell apart from there. So it's just a very bad ending, and disappointed in that. A lot to improve on.
Michael.
Dave, right here. Michael Haig, Baylor Lariat. Before the game yesterday, you said you called this the Who Wants It the Most Bowl. Mm-hmm. Did you feel like the focus and the energy was there going into it, or? Mm-hmm.
I felt it. Yeah. I bring up I bring up the times that we just talked about 20 seconds left in the game, and guys are fighting for it. I think a couple of series before, there was another one that was similar, where time was kind of the score and the time was kind of out of it. I think was it the one right before, I want to say, right? And so, yeah, I think all of those are views of just a fight, I think Christian Morgan is a great one. I mean, he made a great play in that. You look at Christian and his journey, and just all the we'll call them learning experiences, and just all of the people that have come to him and have helped him, and the trust that he's gained in people, man, all that's just so cool. And then to see him at the end of it fight and not be pointing fingers and palms up and any of that. So I saw that there's positive in that.
That was Dave Aranda, a somber Dave Aranda. Talks about how sad he is for the seniors. I'm sad for the seniors. I'm a senior too. Not on the football team, so I'm not sad for myself. But wow, tough way to go out, especially after last year. And the dichotomy, 2 Sugar Bowls in the last 4 years for yours truly, and 2 seasons that just are so forgettable, very forgettable. I did not buy an Armed Forces t-shirt. I hope that if you went at the game, you bought one so you can remember the coldest you've ever been in your entire life. But that's it. We'll see you again next week. Christmas, go have a Merry Christmas. Have a great holiday. Spend it with family. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. We'll be back at some point next week, likely the 27th. Take a couple days off for Christmas, then bring you guys some shows back and get back into the Baylor spirit, because basketball season's going on, and the football offseason is going to be awesome with where Baylor goes at quarterback, where Baylor goes the rest of the offense and the defense, honestly. All that and more unlocked on Baylor.